Okay.
So, hey, welcome everybody to the second installment of the NDI series that are being presented by Video 360. This one is going to be for the designers and integrators. The first one obviously was just an introduction to NDI, and we had the same great people talking about what NDI is and what it can do for you. Now we have some pretty good folks to talk about how to put it together. How do our designers and integrators approach making NDI part of your process? So I think what I want to do first, let's introduce everybody. We have Dr. John Idelson from CSU Monterey Bay. John's got a lot of experience with NDI overall, understanding how it works. We have Jeff Kethley from Pizzazz. Jeff is very experienced with NDI and probably one of the top companies in the country, if not the world, for utilizing remote systems and utilizing NDI to do so. We really appreciate the fact he's joining us. Getting that kind of expertise is pretty amazing. Kane Peterson. Kane is with NewTek. Kane is they're pro from Dover, the one they throw into the barrel when people have questions. So Kane's going to be great for answering those questions. Tamiko there, she's on our marketing team. She's going to help us with our Q&A today. So if you guys do have any questions for us, please type it into the Q&A and we'll make sure that it gets read out. During the thing, Tamiko will be watching that, and if it's something that we can address right away, we will do so, and if not, we'll wait towards the end. And then we have Craig Keeney from Cinex Visual Solve Group, Collab Solve Group, and Craig is intimately involved with helping our distributors and dealers understand and deploy NDI in their environments. So Craig's going to be a good person to talk to about what people are actually doing today out there, maybe some of the challenges they're meeting. So let's start with Kane. Kane, take it away. I'm done.
Well, thank you, Dan. So again, my name is Kane Peterson, and I am with NewTek. I'm actually part of our professional services group, and one of my jobs at NewTek is to assist both our resellers and also even clients who, I guess, admittedly, it is a purchased time with us to help them with their NDI workflows. So getting it implemented, helping them to get the most use out of it, helping them figure out how the networking topology should be. So this is something I actually spend a lot of time with, is trying to help everybody with this kind of stuff. And to also go along with that, I have created a lot of the training materials that NewTek provides to our resellers. And so we do actually have an NDI course that goes through all the aspects of NDI, how it's discovered, how it's transmitted, the different methods of communication it can use, how NDI tools works, how to troubleshoot, how to get the best performance out of it. So that's another resource that's out there. But I can also tell you that a majority of our resellers have also taken that class, so that they are definitely somebody else you can reach out to if you need assistance with NDI. So I will be here to help answer any questions and hopefully enlighten or figure out whatever aspects people are needing more information on. And I will turn it over to whoever is next. Dan.
All right. Well, I think if we're going to talk about the designers and integrators side. Jeff, why don't you fill us in a little bit on what your initial challenges were and what you found was the first hurdle to get over when you were thinking about deploying NDI as part of your systems?
Absolutely. I'm glad to help in this because it's one of those things that it's been an experience. So experience has taught me. And by the way, I'm over 35 years in business, in production, and general system integration in the last 30 years. It's just one of those things you just keep adding to more and more. I never wanted to be an IT person. I had to kind of create that knowledge and learn that knowledge and create a workflow that works well for us and has worked well for many of our clients. The first thing I always ask someone that's going down this route and says, I want to do NDI, the first thing I always ask is, what is your network topology? What do you have set up so far? And most of the time, 85% of the time, they come back with, well, I've got this thing that IT guy set up for me. And they have no idea of what it is. They may know just possibly, if they're in this space a little bit more, they may know it's like, well, it's a Netgear, or it's heaven forbid, a Linksys router, or these type of things. It's like, oh, well, it's plugged in the cable modem over there. We've got everything plugged into that. And so what we start off with is mostly an education from the very start of, if you want NDI to work, we need to start with your infrastructure first and foremost. It's not as simple as just dropping it down on what we consider a flat network where everything's plugged into it. The printers, the cash machine, the cash registers, the phones, everything's plugged into the same network. And right now it works great, but it's not being used near to the potential of that network. And NDI is going to use every bit of potential that's there. And as we were talking right before we went live, Kane was saying it's phenomenal, and it is. It's phenomenal when NDI works properly, and it allows you to do so much. It is like crack, though, because you give it a little bit of taste, and then you want more, and then you want more, and then you want more, and then thus that's whenever things start breaking. So instead of having an adequate start, and it may work fine for 1, 2, maybe 8 different streams on a very basic network. But whenever you're talking about a full deployment, you need managed switches. You need quality managed switches, and that means you may need to up your level of what you consider a quality managed switch. The switch manufacturers have finally caught on that this whole audio video over IP thing's not going to go away. We're going to be here a long time, and they need to be proactive and create hardware and software solutions that allow us to do the things that we need to do and create certain workflows that keep that traffic separated or isolated so that it can continuously flow and not be impeded by somebody trying to download a movie or trying to upload the latest numbers for Excel or something like that. We want that consistent flow of data from point A to point B. And the switch manufacturers is where I always start. What do you have? What do we need to build from? And then the other part is, what are you trying to achieve now? And what are you going to try to think you might want to achieve later? Because that could definitely apply to how much you want to put into it now. You can start off with smaller switches and a lower level switch infrastructure. But if you're trying to do this over here down the road, then you need to start here at the right switch level and the right infrastructure, the right fabric, so that you can build into that as time goes on.
That makes good sense. But how do the end users get to the point to where they know what they really want? Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes to is the problem. This is where I was saying is the problem is you get started in it and you're like, oh well, this computer over here has NDI Studio Monitor on it. Well, then I could watch this input over here. Well, that computer, I'll just put NDI Studio Monitor on that and I'll watch the same input. Oh, in that computer, I'm gonna watch that same input. Sooner or later, though, that input over there, whether it be a hardware piece or a software piece, it's going to run out of subscription bandwidth. So you will not be able to get a quality service on 20 different computers trying to watch that one camera feed or that one output off of a switcher, because it has a certain amount of bandwidth restrictions of what it could do. So the problem is determining what they want to do, but the problem is where it goes back, like I said, is once you figure out how easy it is to do it, you end up writing yourself you're basically backing yourself into the corner at that point, and you needed more infrastructure, you needed a better way of handling it. And then that's when it starts off. It's like, oh, I'll just turn on multicast. That's not always a solution, because
Yeah.
it makes it that much harder on the switch hardware. If your switch hardware can't do multicast well, then your basically your experience is not going to be that good. Everybody I've ever talked to that says, "Oh, I can't, that NDI stuff, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work." Everybody I've talked to them, it comes down to the infrastructure. Once you really dive deep into it, it's the proper infrastructure. If you have the proper infrastructure, it works. Absolutely.
So just like when building a house, you have to build a good foundation first.
Mm-hmm.
But this is like a house. We don't even know how many bedrooms we want yet. We don't know, is it going to be 2-story, 3-story, or are we going to do a ranch style? We don't know that. So I was looking at the Q&A. Jesse Mills asked us a question about when talking to the IT department and asking about VLANs for NDI to route signals across the campus. What are the requests one should make? The VLANs will also carry Dante. So not only are we building a foundation for building our house, but we have another architect that's going to be coming in and offering some stuff on that foundation as well. So is that something that there's particular asks that the IT department should address, or is there is it going to be that mysterious we build as we go thing again?
I know there's definitely specifics that you have to go to the IT department and say, I need this, I need this. And both Audinate with the Dante protocol is very straightforward about it. And the guys at NewTek have adapted over the years. There used to be certain things we would say in the switch network, we don't want this on, we don't want this on, we want this on, but not this. Okay, so we had a protocol that we would go through and say check, 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 off, check, check. But now they've developed the overall NDI infrastructure that's in the backside, the software stack. Now that is allowing us to go in and use less specifics in the switching network, so that way we can make it easier to work on just about any. I personally, to Jesse's question there, I personally prefer to segregate both my traffics. And I know there are people out there that are successfully running NDI and Dante simultaneously on the same VLAN or the same network, flat network, depending on how they're set up. I personally still rather keep it separated. So I keep my NDI so I can control it on that one, and then I keep my Dante on a different VLAN that's completely independent. Then that's just what has worked for us. As you get into higher end routers and switching fabric, such as like the Arista, which is probably right at the top, if not the top of switches out there, then those have certain controls in them that you can do everything all in one VLAN. Kane, what is it is it Sweden that has that horse racing group that's doing like 700 plus NDI and Dante streams across it? It's an insane amount.
There's a few, but that is one of our largest installations is in Sweden. And I think it's anywhere from 500 to 700, depending upon what's going on at that time. I know they use Arista switches, as I understand. And so you definitely can build it that big, but certainly when you get to that kind of size, then the network aspects become critical. That's not just use anything you want. We need to start really picking and choosing exactly what's going to be used at that point.
Interesting. So what would you suggest to designers and integrators? Again, this is who we're focusing this on. What would you suggest to them as a good starting point? What's a good level, or let's say I've been doing a lot of work lately with education. John is well aware of what we're doing. And that we're dealing with a lot of end users that get excited about certain parts of things, but don't have any understanding of others. And what would you suggest to those designers and integrators of like an initial, this is what we need to do. Here's our base platform. Craig might have some input on what his customers are asking for. Craig, do you want to pipe in on that? What are your customers asking for in initial design criteria? Are you there, buddy?
Yeah, I'm here. I just had to go off mute. So we started getting a lot more requests, especially when it came to ease of being able to stream video and things, especially during the COVID crisis. It came more, and this is definitely more and better for higher education markets and stuff, and along with houses of worship and stuff and everything that definitely wanted to begin to stream their services to all their participants. And a lot of times they already had something in place, but they may not have necessarily had a camera that supported NDI directly. So then we might and everything focus them on and send them over to something that Kane could support and stuff and everything with NewTek and everything, with the additional hardware pieces that can then convert these signals to an NDI signal. But then, just like Jeff brings up, the most important question is, okay, we have the camera, we can get you the hardware, but what does your current network look like? And stuff, and they don't have to go big and stuff and everything. I mean, especially when you're looking at houses of worship, you can get yourself a small switch, and we can make something and everything work for what's going on. And then it's just asking the proper questions. And that's part of something that we do here at SYNNEX. I mean, I'll be honest, for me on my side, I support everything primarily on Pro AV, but then on the networking side, I understand and get the requirements of what NDI and everything takes, but I don't know all of the aspects of what all the brands and switches and stuff that we have. But we have a whole bunch of other engineers on our team that work specifically with Aruba, HPE switches, Cisco, and things of that nature. So then it's just as easy as sending out the request, hey, I have customers that's wanting to do this, and I need a switch that's going to meet these requirements and stuff and everything. What can we get, and what can I have within this budget range? And it's very easily done. And the great thing also about, if you come to us and everything from our distributor and you are a reseller of us, all this is free for our resellers. We help and everything make these requirements and designs and stuff for our resellers, and to make sure that you're going to get a working system and everything for you and everything on that's going to meet your requirements.
And I think that's part of the power of NDI is that, frankly, the resources are available and they don't cost anything to get good advice. I mean, it's not a big hurdle in front of you trying to get the advice of how to design this, how to build it out. There's a lot of very good resources. SYNNEX Visual Solve Group is fantastic for doing that. And of course, anytime I've ever had to deal with anybody over at NewTek, it's like, oh my God, you guys are great. All this information that we're getting. John, I know that you've been involved with helping various organizations.
When you introduced me earlier, you said an expert in NDI or new NDI, and say that I'm hardly that. I like to describe myself as an analog cowboy moving into a digital world. And I'm also not a installer or a designer. I'm an end user who just wants it to work, but in educational settings. And my field is instructional technology and media in classrooms. And I go back to the days with 16 millimeter projectors and overhead projectors. But the classrooms that we had, you would have a projector or a screen, and you put an HDMI cable in, and you were up and running. Now we need video for video conferencing, for lecture capture. Putting any cables or wiring, whether it's a new build or an old build, is very hard to do. So because we have networks on campuses, the thought is, it wasn't great. We have network jacks everywhere. Can't we just stick a camera in there? And And Jeff's, smiling. You've had that. There's the jack. Why can't we just use it? For me as an end user, I want the integrators and installers to think about how I'm going to use it, what I need, and how easy it's going to be to troubleshoot it. Because if I'm in front of the class and the camera goes out, that's the trouble. Who do I call? Where's the on-off switch? All networks aren't equal, but to the end user, for the general populace or the students or faculty members, it all should be the same. The AC plug looks like an AC plug. You plug it in and a light bulb lights. Why isn't an Ethernet jack like that? You plug it in and whatever's there should work. And obviously it isn't that. But how do you design these systems so that the end users don't have failures and that they get what they want? And Jeff, your problem though is once somebody realizes you've got NDN and there's a jack, then they go, oh, I want a jack over there. And it reminds me back to the days when we were doing cable television distribution of video in campuses. And, I wanted to have CNN in my office, but the cable was only supposed to be in the classroom, but I knew how to remove a suspended ceiling and put in a tap. So we have things like that. And we still have people sticking things on networks that are noisier than they should be, and that brings it all down. So I'm here listening, but my plea is, the more you know what the end user wants and needs, it's the problem is we don't always know what we can do. Yeah, and it is until you start the system up that you begin to realize it.
That's really one of the key things. When you're an expert in NDI, you're an expert user. You know how you want to use stuff. How do our integrators and designers approach that question with their users? Somebody comes to them as a user. I want to do NDI, but what are you going to use it for? I mean, what is your application? What are some of the touch points that you suggest, John, that designers and integrators have right up front so that they know something that they're going to do?
Well, I think most people don't really know what NDI is unless you're in this media field, but we have a lot of people who say, I'm at this location and I need to be somewhere else via video. And how do I easily do it? And do you do the FaceTime on your phone? Do you do the Zoom conference? Do you get captured later? I'm doing work with the state parks. We're doing electronic field trips. How do we bring in somebody remotely? NDI gives us a lot of powers. It gives us more ways of getting video from one place to another. We don't have to have a satellite truck. We don't, we have multiple options, but then there's all these challenges. So I look at what Jeff does. It's just sort of amazing what he's able to do in multiple locations with cameras all around stadiums and bringing from multiple sites. And that's not that much different from me as a professor who wants to bring in an expert in from somewhere else easily.
Okay, so what would you suggest, Jeff? What would be the first questions that an integrator or designer needs to ask their customer?
I think the first step is ask them, do they want to replace all the cabling? It is a replacement for SDI cabling if they're already cabled up for that, but it's also could be just an enhancement too. So it's not, you don't have to start over. You can add it to it. They could definitely completely coexist, especially with a lot of the gear that we use from NewTek, where we've got both baseband, still got copper going into it with SDI, and then in the other side we're expanding how many inputs off of NDI, and so that's definitely one of the things you have to kind of start out. It's like, okay, well, it's not, we don't have to gut and replace everything, so we could actually just start building from this point, but we need to build the right direction. So asking the client what they want to see, but it always comes down to is it's not so much of I want to use NDI. Some might be, but most of them are going to be like, I want to put a camera over there. I want to put a camera over there. I want to tie in that other room that's down the hall. And then in my mind, I'm going like, NDI, 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 because that's the solution. They don't care about the glue. They care about the end result. So if I want a multi-viewer down the hall, and say the executive suite, or if I wanted it in a different multi-viewer in the lounge or something, I could do that all by cable if I wanted to, any multiple different ways. But it's easier to implement it and usually more cost effective is the other side of that too, with an NDI solution for the long run. So your ROI is going to be better. And it's just a matter of dealing with those expectations. Just like we said already, people don't understand that they want NDI. It's just a solution for what they want.
So I'll have to let my geekness show. But Jeff, the idea that you started with is maybe you just start with a little bit of it. I think for people who have, whether it's SDI or whatever their system is, the thought of making a total switch is a little bit scary. But the idea is, well, let's try with this little part of it. I mean, for me, I can't make my own HDMI cable. I can't make my own SDI cable. I can punch down my own Ethernet cables and I can put jacks on them, and I could buy that reel a lot cheaper. And so for me, the interest in this is that with some of the projects I'm doing where we're not in studios, but we're going out to a park, we're going out to a location where there's nothing there, or a classroom that's not wired. The fact that I can tape down an Ethernet cable and get everything that I need from multiple locations is really pretty fun and impressive. But yeah, for me, at home, I'm trying to figure out, well, should I really move everything to NDI? Because my wife would like to have fewer cables lying around the house. But I'm doing this slow movement. And most people don't have Ethernet cables and SDI cables, lying around their kitchen floor. COVID has allowed us to do that. It's amazing how much cabling and technology
the things you could get away
people
with
have
now,
in their living rooms, their dens, their kitchens.
I can vouch for that. The whole lower floor of my house is offices now.
Yeah, it's we don't even want to look at my desk.
I've seen your desk.
Yeah, you don't want to see it. One thing, the advantage I see with NDI, just the simplest thing, is plenum cabling. The cost of plenum cabling for Cat5 versus the cost for plenum cabling in any other format is fractional. And that plenum cabling, most people in our business already know, it's almost a requirement anymore for installed cable work. So yeah, I mean, if you want to save money right off the bat, NDI is something you can save money with just in the cabling. Kane, what would your suggestions be for designers and integrators to establish some baseline questions for their customers? What are they trying? You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like many things that they've said, trying to figure out what the workflow is. What are you trying to accomplish? Trying to figure out maybe where you're going in the future so that you can plan for that. Certainly, I would always recommend, regardless, that you always, put in a switch that maybe is just a little bit more than what you need, right? Because I almost guarantee it that you're going to use it. And it's best to have it's nice to have that little bit of overhead regardless, right? Even if you're not going to use, all the ports on it, it's never going to hurt you. Where if you get a port that's just or a switch, it's the minimum to make it work, you add one thing and you go over the limit. So that's something to look at. The other thing too, I'm kind of coming at it how I approach a lot of this stuff when people are coming to me. The other thing I constantly am asking for is a diagram. Do you have a diagram of this? How are these things connected? What kind of speeds do we have? How far away are these things? Because I find that especially when you get to something that's a little more complicated, I'm going to send stuff across the school campus network, or, we got these multiple locations we're trying to put together. I need to be able to see, we all talking about this project need to see the same thing, because otherwise everybody's going to put their own little twist to it. Right. And they'd be like, well, did you mean this or did you mean that? And a diagram, I think, is a crucial part. into making a working solution once you get to anything that's more than just like very, very basic, right? If it's just one switch, plugging in one switch, you're probably okay. But as soon as we get anything larger than that, I think a diagram is a crucial part that should be part of the installation workflow, understanding of what's going on.
Good place to start then. It's just trying to figure out what the physical environment is. First.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, after we get to that, then we have to start talking about what is our logical environment. That's the switches and what software are we using. We had a few people ask some questions. I think they're pretty applicable to where we're at right now in our discussion. I have one from an anonymous. In my case, we have the NDI network in one subnet, but not able to get to it from another. What request should we ask the IT department to work properly? Is it just a particular port? But according to them, all the ports are open. Is there?
Yeah. There's a few things there. So NDI is by default uses a method of discovery, right, to find the other clients. That's called MDNS, Multicast Domain Name Service, and that mechanism is going to be limited to one subnet, right? Switches, or I shouldn't say switches, routers, right, that connect your different networks together, don't pass this information across to another network. So the other, when your client is saying, hey, everybody out there, right, I want to go find you and discover what sources, even though you have devices on another network, they never get the signal, to be found. That doesn't mean you can't make it work. It's just that the default nature of NDI is not going to work in that situation. So there's two mechanisms you can use to make it work. One is that you can create what are called remote sources. This is using a tool that comes with the NDI tools software package called Access Manager. And you go in there and you basically hard code in the IPs of the other systems that you want to talk to. And then when an NDI application starts up, besides it still looking as it normally does, it then also has built into it this list of, hey, go try to talk here, go try to talk to this. And then if it can communicate with those things, then it will communicate. So that's one mechanism. And then the other one, and this is a newer mechanism, and it does require an extra component, but it can also make, when you go larger with this, it can make it easier. We have a service called NDI Discovery Server. And so if you get that software, which is free, and put it on a machine, you can then, using that same Access Manager software, basically tell your clients, I have a discovery server, here's where it lives, right? It lives at this IP address. And then all that manages the communication between all of these devices, whether they're on the same subnet or not, and allows them to help find each other. And that can help. So using one of those two mechanisms, and you can in fact use both of them simultaneously. It's not like one necessarily takes away from using the other. It's just a question of how big are you going, right? If it's only one or two cameras, or you're crossing a subnet, then you're probably fine with just using remote sources. But if this is something that's going to grow and get bigger, and there's going to be more and more devices and stuff, then Discovery Server can be a better way to go because it's a little more adaptable. Now, the last thing I'll just say on that being said, I know they said all ports are open, which is definitely what you want, but do be aware that, these mechanisms that I'm talking about, all they do is set up NDI to try to do it. The network department still has to allow it to happen. So if they don't have the proper port forwarding, or they got firewalls in place or things like that, they still need to allow this communication. So it's not like I type something into Access Manager and Access Manager is not going into the switch and like configuring it as it needs to be. All it's doing is telling NDI, hey, go try to talk to this thing. And if the switch router allows for it, then great, it will happen. If it doesn't, well, then you still have to figure out what's going on in there. And we do have some resources with like what ports and stuff are used to help you figure some of that stuff out. But that could still be something you have to work with IT to determine what exactly is going on. If you try using those tools and they're still not giving you communication, there's something that is preventing, the communication from going on at that point.
Yeah, I think, Tamiko, we got that one from Bill Memes. Why don't you read that one out to Kane? I think this is a great segue into this, because here's a specific use case. And maybe Kane, Jeff, Craig, maybe you guys have seen this. Yeah, John, I'm not going to talk to you, but, you
know. Bill wants to know that when you're sending NDI from one computer to a Wirecast Gear 420 with both systems on the same network or subnet, NDI Tools Studio Monitor, they sees NDI signal from the remote system, but Wirecast doesn't see it. So is there a proper starting point when troubleshooting NDI integrated into the Wirecast or other systems using NDI integration? And as a side note, it says great topics and discussion.
Yeah. So the first thing in any kind of troubleshooting is that you need to understand what it is you're trying to fix, because if most NDI issues come down to one of two categories, either a discovery issue in that it's not showing up right in my list, or a transmission issue, which is that I see it, but then when I try to connect to it, it's not working, right? I get no video, it's stuttery video. So we need to know clearly, because this is something I get all the time. I just get, it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, what does doesn't work mean? I'm like, well, I don't get anything. And I'm like, well, does not get anything mean like you can't see it at all? Like there's nothing to pick, or are you picking it and you're not getting anything, you know? So you need to, I know sometimes when I'm talking to people, I seem like I'm being really picky, but I'm like, I need to know the answer to this, because this then leads me down, what path am I going down next, right? Am I trying to figure out why you can't see it at all? Or am I trying to figure out why the data is not flowing once you select it? So that's the first question. Now it sounds like it's not discovering it, but I mean, I guess, again, you never know, because some people just kind of use too generic a terminology there. The next question is this on the same system, this Wirecast and Studio Monitor, or are they two separate systems, right, that are on the same network? If they're the same system, I'm going to admit that's kind of odd, because generally I wouldn't expect there to be a problem there. But if they're two separate systems, I mean, okay, that definitely can happen. I know, at least on the Windows platform, probably one of the most common issues that people run into is Windows has this concept of a public and a private network. And what that means is the Windows firewall that's built into Windows tries to determine the kind of network you're on, to determine how much security it should put up, like how much should it be trying to block traffic. And if you don't answer it, which a lot of people don't, right? The pop-up comes up and they just kind of like let it go away, or they don't answer it or whatever, or they just leave it on the default. Well, the default's going to be public, which is higher security, right? Public being the idea that like you're at a coffee shop with your laptop, right? Trying to access the internet. You don't want to talk to anybody in the coffee shop, right? You just want to talk to the internet. So a public network puts up the firewalls and it enforces them stronger than they normally would be. But NDI wants to talk to all the things around you. So if you're on a network that your computer is identified as public, then the firewall is probably getting in the way and preventing this communication from going on. So one of the first things I always tell people when they're having problems getting applications to see each other is go into Windows. If it's a Windows PC, go in and see what your network type is. Is it public or is it private? If you want it to say private. If you get private, then there might be other things to check into, but that's usually the first thing in there. The one other one I'll throw out there, because this can also commonly happen in Windows, is that if you're using a third-party firewall, not the one built into Windows, try disabling it temporarily and seeing if that gets it to work. Because the Windows firewall is that public-private thing is pretty much the only thing you got to deal with. But if it's a third-party firewall, which a lot of security suites will include, well, they tend to be a little more permissive in what they do. And if you don't, again, have them programmed correctly, and they could be like on a per application basis, so that could allow this application to talk, but this other application not to talk. You got to go in there and configure that firewall and make sure. But an easy way to find out if it's a problem is just go in and turn it off temporarily. I mean, I know Windows will complain, but if it works, then the firewall's blocking it, and then you got to go in there and figure out what configuration in there is causing the issue. That's generally, I shouldn't say generally, I say common issue, right? There's others, but that's probably one of the first to look into. Jeff might have other ones, because I'm sure he's had a lot of experience with other ones in there.
I actually would echo everything you said, Kane, almost verbatim. because you taught me a lot too.
But, it's
the biggest issue that I've found is definitely firewalls. Second after that is if you're in the process of troubleshooting, which is what we do on a daily basis. If you're troubleshooting, number one, install NDI tools on every computer you ever need to touch. That's your base to start from. You can start there's a signal generator in there that you could actually build off of using that as an NDI feed. None of the other software that you want to use, just that one little piece that says, I'm making this NDI, it's color bars, it's whatever you want to put into it. Then from that point, on the other machine, NDI Studio Monitor, if those two can see each other, then you're golden, usually. I say usually. But that's where to start. Start with NDI Studio Monitor. If it sees the NDI, then it's most likely the Wirecast issue on that side. And what I have noticed, especially on third-party Wirecasts, being one of those, and also Livestream Studio, very recently vMix was the same thing. They were not updating their DLLs, the behind-the-scenes part that comes from NewTek. They were not updating as fast. Livestream Studio was one of the worst for the longest time, but Wirecast too. But they weren't updating as fast as the newer versions of software that were coming out, the new SDKs that were coming out from NewTek. So that alone made all kinds of troubleshooting near impossible because they weren't on the same level. One was at 3.0, the other's at 4.5. They did not, as much as we'd like it to be backwards compatible, it was just not possible because the cameras were updated to the latest greatest, which are updated and according to the latest SDK, but the software was way, way, way behind. So it's a lot of small little things you have to check. But if you start with NDI Studio Monitor and a source, whether that's from the NDI Tools Pack or just NDI Studio Monitor and NDI Studio Monitor, either way too, if you start from that point, then you can narrow it down. Is it a network a problem or a firewall problem? I pretty much do the same thing. Is I turn off the firewalls, I turn all the security stuff down, and then make it work, and then work my way back up to where it should be.
Yeah. So Jeff, we talked about the IT office, but it really sounds like in your productions, you really need to have an IT production member.
It's an IT wrangler. We call them the IT wrangler. Because they're basically just trying to wrangle cats. They're trying to go out there and tie up cats. I mean, it's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it, and that's what we end up doing.
Well, but like you're saying, updating some software probably isn't something that your IT guy would do on your computer. They sort of
correct.
Expect those things. I will admit my failure is that when all else fails, make sure you take the lens cap off your NDI camera. I spent about 4 hours on that one.
Yeah, getting a good image.
Well, I have one last thing I was going to throw out there too, just as a really other common troubleshooting thing that I think is just a good thing to look at too, is if you have a managed switch and you're having problems, I always bring with me a little tiny unmanaged switch. Not that I'm saying you want to use this for your production, but if I'm having problems with two devices communicating, I'll disconnect them from the managed switch, plug them into the unmanaged one, and see if they talk. And if they do, then I know that other switch, something in it is causing the issue, right? At least I know where to focus my investigation into. So that's another really good troubleshooting test, because you can't mess up an unmanaged switch. And if I'm just trying to get like two devices talking, right, that's going to run pretty much fine. So that's another good tip, is just, take a little switch, plug both things in. If that works, then at least you know where you need to focus your effort on to trying to figure out the problem.
Bill added that the Wirecast 420 Studio Monitor is on the same system. The signals being sent from the remote system through the scan converter to a Mac Mini.
Okay, so if that's the case, I would check and see what security software is on that machine, because maybe it's got a firewall on it that's doing like per application blocking. Even technically the Windows firewall can do that as well. So it's possible that if you just turn off the firewall and it works, then you might have something like that going on, where the firewall is blocking that application from communicating the way it needs to, and it just needs to be
I would say that definitely on the Mac Mini. Recently, we were building out some systems for clients, and they were doing the remote contributors were all on Macs. I spent more time fighting the security side of the Mac to get TeamViewer installed, to get MediaLooks installed, to do all these pieces to get it installed. I spent more time fighting the security of that than I did the technology at all. So it was all came back to the Mac was just not allowing it to talk. And so I would definitely look, Bill, in that aspect, I would look at the Mac personally right now.
Yeah, we're starting to get some really good questions. I think one of them from Tony Mobley, and then we have an anonymous that's also, looking for some guidelines of. Let's just talk about this. What would you say at a church or a small school, lecture hall maybe? We want 2 cameras. We maybe want to have 2 monitoring systems, and we want to be able to stream it out via Zoom, Teams, whatever. We want to be able to do that. What would you say would be, one, a decent budget for building that out? This may be a Craig question here, but 2, how would you approach the customer in getting them to understand that you need to do this device, and this device, and you're good to go? Obviously, we love our Sabre 20 camera, and that plugs right in. But I'm not going to make a pitch. I really want to know what you would suggest to your designers or customers when you were saying, what would the budget for this be?
Well, one of the things I would first ask is, if they don't have cameras and they're looking to purchase cameras, is where are these cameras going to be mounted and stuff and everything, for one, and how far is the subject matter going to be away? Because then that gives us an idea of how much of a zoom and things of that nature needs to be on the camera to capture what you're looking to do. And that right there alone can help determine a lot of your budget, because obviously if you're going to be needing a 30x camera or something, your budget's already going to be decently high up there, especially if you're looking at a PTZ camera. And then also, I know a lot of times for some houses of worship, they also want some sort of speaker tracking capability. And sometimes, so then you might be looking at whether or not that's automatically added onto the camera, or maybe if that could be added at a later time and stuff. It just depends and stuff and everything. So the first and foremost I always look at is how far away does the camera need to be, and what is the zoom capability we're going to need. And then I would look at building out and everything, the network and stuff and everything secondly on top of that. But I think the cameras, if they don't already have something in place, is really what's going to kind of set the budget and everything for what they're looking to do. And if they have cameras in place, again, NewTek is awesome and everything with being able to providing all the equipment and stuff and everything to convert existing cameras and stuff and everything to get that NDI signal if they have something in place and everything already and getting it there. So if you don't need, like, say something for like a 12x 12 zoom camera, you could be looking anywhere from something like maybe around, and this is just hardware. I'm not talking about what some people and everything go for install and stuff, because that's all going to change and everything where you are demographically and everything around the country and stuff and everything. So I would say anywhere and everything from like $4,000 and stuff and everything, maybe in equipment, and that can range all the way up into like closer to 8 or 10, depending on the size camera, whether that's going to be PTZ, you're going to need a 30X and things of that nature and stuff. So it definitely goes from one extreme to another, depending on the environment you're in.
Yeah, hate to do a pitch here, but the Sabre 20 NDI camera, $1,800, 20X zoom. So, kind of in that sweet spot in between a 12 and a 30.
Yep.
And that the 20X can also we can also make that part of our autopilot system where it does the speaker tracking as well.
Yep.
So, yeah, again, I really don't like these webinars being pitch sessions, but when I hear people talking about cameras, it's definitely something I know. Anyway, that's what I'd suggest.
When you're setting up a system like that, though, Craig, so can you make it scalable? Say you don't have a big budget. Is that something that you can start with, sort of like a core setup that allows you to achieve a lot of what you're trying to do, and then build out from there in a graceful way where you're not having to sort of redo everything when you want to scale up? Is that a thing you can do for them?
Yeah, that's definitely something that can be done. And the part where Jeff and everything brought in is see and everything, keep in mind and everything where you want to be able to go and stuff and everything. You may start off small and everything, but let us know and everything where you want to end up and everything, because then that's going to depend on your network. How big of a switches and stuff and everything are you going to need? Are you going across and everything multiple networks? Are you all streaming? Is everything just happening internally and stuff and everything on just like a business network? Are you going across campus wide? Are you streaming something over the internet and stuff? These are all and everything things that are going to come into play on how this is going to be able to scale. But most certainly, yes, you can definitely scale and everything gracefully. It just, you don't necessarily want to start out, and if you know you want to end up here at a higher end level, don't necessarily buy and everything the smaller kind of lower end managed switch. You may want to try to go ahead and maybe save up and everything for it and get your higher end switches and stuff, so you have that network backbone, so you can be able to end up in everything where you want to and not have to backtrack on your network, because the network is obviously the backbone of where everything you're going to need for your NDI network.
Yeah, so it seems like the end devices, the cameras, the monitors, those are pretty much fixed. You know, that you're going to put in this camera, this camera, this camera, this display, this display. The biggest question is, how do we build out our network to begin with? We have a question from Bob Scott, which this actually goes right to that. Can you guys see the Q&As, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah. So what would your suggestion to Bob be? You know, you guys take a look at that. It's an interesting question. How do you go from, 8 to 30? Do we start off with a single gig switch? Do we tier the switches? How would you suggest these guys go? Star and spoke? Do we want to go with hub? What kind of network environment do you think that an easy build would be?
Well, the big thing I see in that one is that, if you're taking a PC and you're sending it to multiple classrooms, it gets also into things like what resolution is the computer display, right? Because the NDI feed is going to match that computer display. So is it, HD or higher than HD or whatever, because that's going to determine like bit rates that are used. Also, what kind of content is on that screen? Is it motion video or is it just like PowerPoints? Because NDI actually will detect the screen changes on the computer screen and determine if new frames need to be sent, at least if you're running the software internal on the computer. If you're using an external box like a converter, well, this obviously is not going to know if the screen updates. So it's going to be processing full frame rate all the time through the network. And so, gigabit, if gigabit networking is what you have, and let's say it's an HD level frame, 8 is, you're kind of pushing the limit right there. And even that's, really depends a lot on like what the screen content is. So if they need to go that or even higher, you're potentially looking at multicast, communication to get that signal out to multiple screens. And at that point, then it's making sure that you've got the proper multicast infrastructure put in place. That's all the switches that have the proper settings on it and everything configured the way that you need it to go. It certainly could be made to work, there's no doubt, but it might not be something that you already have pre-installed, right? It might require some switch upgrading, or at the very least, making sure your IT department is willing to make those changes for you, and that it does not affect something else for whatever reason. I mean, you know, there's always that possibility as well.
And Kane, I just wanted to ask and everything, because I'm sure some people and everything on here might have been trying to write down stuff and everything that you were saying as close to you are. Thankfully, we're recording this and we'll be able to get this out to some of the viewers here. But is there something, do you have an address or something that you can direct some people to and everything for the content or classes that you have that go over and everything, some of the stuff that you're talking about as far as searching the tools or being able to get these signals from one subnet and everything to the next and everything that people might be able to go to and view later to still educate themselves further?
Well, there is some information off of NDI.tv. There's a tech document, a tech brief. I'll admit it's a little old, but everything in it still applies. There's kind of some newer stuff that maybe hasn't made it into that document yet. So that's definitely a good place to start. Otherwise, to be honest, the next thing I'd recommend is really working with your NewTek reseller. You know, one of the reasons I made the training information was we wanted to train our resellers so that they could be that person that people can go to need this kind of assistance. So that being said, like, you know, I at NewTek also, you know, can be brought on to assist with those as well. So that's another option in there. So there's kind of different levels from, you know, hey, there's like the free documentations available. You can work with your local reseller in the area to, you know, getting a NewTek person that can assist you with your project if that's what you're looking for.
And we'll add links when we put this up on YouTube. We'll add links in the description so that everybody can get there easy.
Yeah.
Looks like we have just a couple open ones now, really, on the Q&As, and we're just about the end of our time, which, again, you get so much information. It's just really fantastic sessions. I love these. Jesse Mills asked about, can NDI be integrated with QSYS? If so, how would routing, presets, and UCI programming work?
As far as I'm aware, QSYS doesn't have direct NDI integration into their product yet. I don't know if that's something they're planning on doing or not. I mean, certainly they could if they wanted to. I just don't know if they've done it. But there's other ways you could certainly interact with it. I mean, you know, there are all sorts of products that will take NDI, turn it into baseband signals, or Dante is certainly used quite often alongside NDI setups as well. And there's even software that will convert NDI into Dante and vice versa. So having something like that should be doable. It's just a question, I guess, of what all exactly you want to be done. But ultimately, if QSYS wants to have integrated NDI support, they just need to build it into their product. I mean, it is not there's nothing NewTek is doing to preventing that from happening. It's something they would need to. So if anything, you should be reaching out to them and saying, I want this, right? Because that's part of it, is getting some of these manufacturers to realize, hey, if there's a market of people who want this, then they're more willing to add that capability into their product. Yeah,
there's some barriers there sometimes, but I definitely understand that part of the business as a manufacturer. We had one more question with guidelines for budgeting and make a transition to NDI. Basically, switch. You know, and then we talk about the cameras and display units, but that's your budgeting guidelines right there. You don't need to make the leap all at once. I have a small NDI setup just here, and I just use it's a TP-Link or something, just some basic router. And I'm not using anything ridiculous to run my stuff, because I wanted to make it, my network, I wanted to make it as dumb as possible. As basically something I can operate. So a budget can start as low as just a few $100 for a router, and then start putting your peripherals on it. That would be my answer to the budgeting question.
Sure.
Do you guys have any other input on that?
I would totally agree. That's where NDI tools, I'm always recommending people download NDI tools. It's free, install it on machines. You can start testing stuff out, right? Just kind of see. And yeah, even you don't need a huge network just to do something small, I mean, obviously we have to determine the size of it, but if it's just sending a couple, 1, 2, 3 signals around, to be honest, probably any network is going to handle that. It's once we start getting into half a dozen to a dozen, then things start to become a little more critical. And you know, as to how critical it is, depends on what you have in place, but usually even just sending like, you know, 2, 3 signals, you know, almost any network can handle that as long as it's gigabit.
Yeah, and so if you were... the NDI-HX is also...
that's another thing too. I mean, then your requirements go down a lot, right? Because the bandwidth is a lot lower.
So if you were say you had a really restricted budget, but you wanted to make the switch, instead of necessarily doing it all at once, could you be sort of doing a transition where you're beginning to add hardware to your system that will support going full NDI in the future?
Yeah, there's, I mean, there's converters you can get. So like this, where you can plug it into existing equipment you have. Luckily, a lot of even cameras that have NDI built in it still have traditional baseband connections on them as well. So even the reverse case is true. You could start buying equipment that's got an NDI. Maybe you're not even planning on using it day one, but you know that's where you're headed, right? You could get cameras, still plug them in SDI or HDMI, use them with traditional gear, but you're already starting down that path where, you know, now when I get the next piece, I could do that. And that even being said, there's no reason you can't even use them a combination. You could take a PTZ camera that's, let's say it's SDI plugged into your production, you know, that you're normally using, but you want somebody to control it. They can just use the free NDI studio monitor, pull it up over the network. They get a live preview and there's PTZ controls and they start controlling it. So here now you got somebody controlling the camera over the network while you're still using the camera as an SDI camera for your actual production. All of that kind of stuff is doable.
Yeah, and what I like is the virtual camera USB. So now we can start moving this. We can use that NDI source as a camera. And yep. Something like what we're doing right now.
That's literally what I'm using this at this instant to get me into Zoom.
Yeah, it's an easy way to progress. You know, because like the 20 I've got in front of me, I've got USB, SDI, HDMI, NDI all hooked up and running at the same time, and I use it for different things constantly. Yeah, I find it to be great. I like I do like the PTZ control on Studio Monitor. It's pretty neat. Works flawlessly.
Maybe one of the things we can do on the next webinar, I know you yourself and Kay and Jeff, are y'all currently running NDI systems and stuff and everything right now for this webinar?
Yes. I'm running through a TC1 myself.
Maybe and everything on the next one.
The NDI festival next time.
No, I'm just wondering and everything for people and everything that are just curious. Maybe because this is just like they're wondering for about like small networks, we can just go over like a basic kind of like signal flow or gear for what you currently have in stock and what you're using and everything to do what we're doing right now. And so,
I'm all for it
because I bet that would be very interesting to some of our users right now that. Viewers that are on doing that.
But only thing is that Kane's actual apartment really looks like that though.
I wish.
I'll let you guys come do an install at my place anytime you want.
Yeah. Well, I know you've got an NDI camera, John. I know you do. Let's see, there's one more question from Tony. I know a lot of NDI users are using vMix, but what about Mimo Live? Anybody?
Mimo Live works great with NDI cameras. In fact, that was one of the setups we worked with a powered switch. You were able to walk in with a Mac with a Mimo Live running on it and run out 4 Ethernet cables and connect them to an NDI camera, and you're with power over Ethernet and you're running.
Super.
Jeff, have you played with Mimo Live at all, or are you too much of a PC guy?
I have a policy about using Macs in production, and let's just say I'm not as exactly supportive of using Macs in production.
Well, we in education have to be, open to all sorts of things.
Oh, I'm open. I'm open to using them for something else. Absolutely, just not production.
We're Which this does bring up. I thought there was a question, I don't know if we got it answered, which was talking about NDI and M1 support. And just really quick, it's already been announced by a few people, but or at least not maybe publicly, but well, publicly, but not like on an official thing. But the next major release of NDI will have the M1 support in it. Although from what I now understand, the latest NDI SDK that is shipping as of today will run properly on M1. It's still going to run through Rosetta and be recompiled, but they made the changes into it so that it will at least, because there were some issues previously where the Rosetta wasn't working with it 100%. Because they were like looking for your CPU type to determine what features to turn on or turn off. Well, obviously, since the M1 chip wasn't an Intel, it really didn't know like what in the world it should do. So they've kind of made those changes. So it should work today with the latest software through Rosetta, and native support will be when the next major release of NDI comes out. I don't know when that is, but that will be that is a roadmap for that.
Well, there you go. So the next session is going to be for the users. And Craig had a great suggestion. We can I'll just say, hey, this is what I've got hooked up. This is how it's working for me. I would love to have you guys join us again. And then we could have John kind of leading the charge on the user side. I'm going to put you on the spot, John. I am.
Yep. It's your turn in the barrel, man.
Well, I think we could find a lot of end users who'd like to talk about it. And clearly, the pandemic and the remote learning and remote offices are going to have major impact in educational settings. So let me see if I can pull some of my university friends to see if they get into Barrel here.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
I remember, I'm technically retired. I'm failing it, but I'm technically retired.
Yeah, right.
You need to work harder on that, my friend. Well,
again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. John, Jeff, Kane, Craig, Tomiko, everybody that viewed this. I really gained a lot out of every time I do one of these sessions myself. This is how I get my knowledge. And I just want to thank everybody. It was very cool. It was a very nice discussion. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to write to me. I can make sure it gets passed off to the right people. My email is dan@vdo360.com. That's VDO. The letters, 360.com. I'm happy to answer most of them. Since I don't know anything, I'll pass it on to the people that do. And we'll just do what we can to help you out. Okay? So I think at this point, we're going to bail, guys. And
thank you, guys. It's always fun to be chatting with you all. You have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, I'm going to try.
Totally
We'll set the next one up for 3 weeks from now. That works for you guys. That 3 week period's enough for us to not get tired of each other's faces all the time. So.
Sounds good.
All right. See y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks again. Bye.